It's a very explosive introduction there.
It sure is. Hey, hey, hey.
Hi, hey, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Threat Thursday Live. We are back at this again. This is probably another 20-minute round. We're going to keep it to 20 minutes. We'll see what happens. We've slowly beginning trying to trim it, but stuff happens. We like talking. We like showing off what we're doing here. So hopefully you guys are enjoying what we're doing. We'll keep running at this until it becomes too big to fail and we don't have a choice, or people hate it and we'll probably still do it anyway. But anyways, this week, what do we talk about, Tyler?
This week we have Volt Typhoon, which is a pretty popular threat actor, Chinese threat actor that's going against a lot of U.S. government and Five Eye partners. It is definitely on the radar for a lot of industries and a lot of people.
Yeah, and this one has been really interesting. We published this just a few weeks ago, so this one's fairly new. If you are a Scythe customer, this is a threat that you have access to. You can go check it out, run it, see how you stand up against it. Um, but all in all, let's go quick overview. Volt Typhoon, who are they? What are they? What are they doing right now?
I'll go ahead and add this to the stage.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't have access, don't see it, this is a quick little knowledge base article that we do for the write-ups. We based what we're doing with this threat off of a recent CISA article that we can show off here in a minute and give you guys the link to, but it was really interesting to read in the reporting and see what they're doing. Volt Typhoon, obviously being state-sponsored PRC, they are a very commonly a cyber espionage group, but a lot of what's happening right now in the world and what they're doing is deviating from that. This report and this set of behaviors that we're seeing from them isn't them doing the traditional espionage or IP theft, right? They're staging themselves. They're trying to pre-position in the event that geopolitical tensions or all of the craziness in the world actually pops off so that they could cause follow on potentially disruptive or destructive actions in OT environments, specifically around, like you were saying, Five Eyes, or with the big focus being on the United States.
Yeah, for sure. I think
What's
another great point to that too, Trey, is that they have this definitely seems like a stage, like an iterative staging that they're doing, like you would hit on, because they're gaining long-term persistence, sometimes up to it's shown here in the CTI up to 5 years of being undetected. So they're digging in, they're laying low and trying not to be seen, waiting for that time to do what the actual attack is.
Yeah, and in their typical fashion, as has been historically seen with Volt Typhoon, they're doing a lot of living off the land techniques, and they're not bringing in a ton of craziness or doing a ton of custom tooling. Uh, Thinking about that, what's interesting is that prepositioning is going to have broader effects and than just hurting us, right? If something does happen, if they decide to disrupt or do some destructive actions in U.S. infrastructure, specifically like power generation, things like that, it's going to affect more than just us because we are tied in with our neighboring countries. So, like if it hits specific regions in the U.S., Canada's coming with us. Like it's one of those things where their power grid's tied to ours as a partnership, and there's really nothing that can be done about that. But I think that's probably enough about them, what they're up to. Let's focus in on what we actually got developed for this thread and what they've been doing. There's a couple really cool novel things that have been going on.
Yeah, I think for sure the first one I want to point out that I thought was super interesting and very neat, and just a very novel, unique way to go after host enumeration. So one tactic that they're using, like trying to live off the land, not be seen, using LOBAS and things like that, instead of doing host enumeration or user enumeration or valid user discovery through, get AD user, get local user, things like that, they're actually they're running this PowerShell one-liner that goes into the security log and pulls out 4624 of NIDs, which are successful logons. And from that, it's pulling out the successful logons inside of the event log and exporting it to this user.dat file, which essentially is going to show them what users are able to log in. So it's getting valid users that are able to log in. They know when they logged in, like time wise. So if a few days versus a few months ago, you might not be there after a few months. So I thought that was super interesting. I've never seen anything like that in any of the CTI that we've looked at or on any of the missions that I've been on. And that also
Yeah,
feeds into another one that they that has been discovered. This was in the CISA CTI that I'll put the link in the chat here in a minute so everybody can see it. but they pulled this logins.ps1 from a confirmed intrusion of Volt Typhoon on an undisclosed partner. They're not going to tell us who it is, but this PS1 basically does the same thing as that one-liner, but it also adds in the DCs, the domain controllers. So it tries to enumerate the domain controllers and then goes onto their logs and pulls out successful logins from that, which is again 4624 event ID. And from there, they're able to see what is your domain controller, how do you get there, who has access to it, who's able to successfully log on. So two very very interesting, very novel ways for them to enumerate valid users that I think is very neat.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I can't think of the last time I've seen someone that wasn't doing the traditional user enumeration, at least in reporting. Seeing
Yeah,
someone kind of thinking outside the box here and being like, well, I don't need to do a ton of queries. I don't need to light up people's logs and stuff. I'll just go check the event log real quick.
yeah. And
And I mean,
who
in
monitors
reality,
the event log? Nobody.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, very few people, if anyone, are like actively like watching to watch the event log.
Hmm.
Like the PowerShell stuff might potentially tip something off, but in all reality, I think that blends in really well. That could look like an admin is like, hey, who uses this host kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's definitely like the only time you're looking at the event log is to make sure that those logs are still there, right? I mean, you're probably monitoring for event log clearing, which is also done in this thread that we'll talk about in a little bit. But you're not monitoring the anyone querying the event log. That's a very interesting way to lay low.
Yeah, the other novel thing I thought was really interesting with the reporting around Volt Typhoon for this one is we've seen where they're kind of going back to those traditional roots. They're making mistakes. We're seeing active typos and misspellings of commands and things within what they're doing, which would lead you to believe that they're not just completely going off a click script and copy and pasting and things like that. They're actively going hands on keyboard and doing some of these behaviors. It's not fully automated, I guess you could say. So I thought that was really cool. And yeah, there's an
Yeah,
example on screen now if you're curious about what that looked like. So
yeah, for
we
sure.
really wanted to include that into these threats as well because that's showing the human element. It's showing they're doing more than just copy paste, run, let it go,
Mhm.
or semi automating stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. I think too it shows that they're not just like spraying out a bunch of attacks to whoever is um, could be vulnerable to it. They're targeted attacks. Like from an intelligence standpoint, if you're seeing the these misspellings, you know that they're going interactive. You know that they care about the machine that they have access to, and that they're on there. They're utilizing it. They have hands on keyboard for that host itself, which is very interesting.
Yeah, which it's cool from a hunt perspective. If you're actively trying to figure out what's going on, this is a good tip off to let you know it's not a random bot, it's not something like that. There's someone actively there in your
Mm,
environment.
for sure.
But yeah, cool. That was the kind of the novel stuff. What else do they have going on? What all do we include in this threat here, Tyler?
So in this thread, we have a couple of other scripts that we pull down. We have this is before the script is pulled down, but for credential harvesting, they're using mini dump to dump the LSAS process. So we have that included in our thread that we'll get into in a second. Then they do some archival and exfiltration. Another kind of novel thing they're doing is looking at the stored putty sessions. So they're going in there and seeing what credentials and what saved putty sessions you have. So again, just more kind of low lying, unique, novel ways to enumerate networks, users, other credentials, and things like that, other hosts on your machine without having to actively to actively scan or do something like that. This is all passive. It's all already stored on the machine and in spots that are not commonly looked at, right? You're not looking at your stored putty sessions and who's querying those files. And then
Yeah,
two,
and
they
this is all
pull
in support of their potential lateral movement into your OT environments if necessary. So like,
for sure.
odds are you're doing that only a couple ways, right? Through something like a putty session or through a jump host, stuff like that. So
Hmm.
you've got to have ways to access it.
For sure. Yeah. I think definitely looking at it like trying to collect all this information to then later on go back in and use it for whatever kind of malicious means that you're you're looking at. But I'll just quickly talk for a few seconds about the other scripts and a few of the other actions that are done, and we could probably jump into the platform and show them so we don't take up too much time.
Yeah, let's
Um,
do it. Yeah, we're about halfway there. So
yeah. It goes by so fast. So one of them, another one that was neat. They will rename WinRAR to Rumph.exe here, or RAR to Rumph, which is WinRAR, the archival executable program. So in the script, we have it where it pulls down WinRAR and renames it, and then goes in and actually archives some files via that way. So you can see it with the rename, and it installs it for you if you don't already have it. It deletes it in the end, so you don't have to worry about that. We talked about lateral movement. So for the lateral movement here, we simulate that, emulate that with ps_exec. So we have some variables at the top of our thread that you would set that would be able to ps_exec over your network to whichever machine you specify with the username and password. We have that to simulate them, Volt Typhoon being them, to simulate Volt Typhoon running that mini dump, pulling that LSAS, or they have another way of pulling the ntds.dit file and cracking that. So in this, we're kind of simulating like they have those two dumps, they crack them offline. Now they're gone back interactive, which we had shown earlier, and then using those credentials to laterally move. And then we'll have a short little NTDS, another threat coming out here. I don't know, probably next month or so, for how they do that. The Volt Typhoon, they do so many interesting things, and it's such a hot topic that we're almost going to have like a little series on them, kind of. But more on that later. And then for defense evasion, the last step, they go in and they clear all of the event logs, which we also do in our threat. You can obviously remove this from the threat campaign if you're going to run it, if you don't want all of your event logs cleared. And as always, we have the cleanup in there. So these are all the files and executables that are created from this threat. The LSAS dump, user.dat, system info, the discovery commands, and things like that. These are the steps. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then we have some detections that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But I think that's probably enough of that. You want me to switch it over to the platform, and you can go through some of the steps, kind of show it off a little bit?
Yeah, let's look at the attack flow first, and then we can show it from the platform's perspective.
For sure.
So these attack flows are really cool. If you're a visual person, we like providing these and showing these. So it's cool to watch how it's broken down. I know sometimes just reading through a bunch of TTPs can be a slog, but it's a pretty big campaign all in all. And as you click through it, as you look through these, you'll get to see exactly the commands we're running, what's going on within this process. And it's doing a little bit of everything that you would expect from someone like Volt Typhoon. The basics of getting in, trying to stay in, validating the area around them, recognizing new users and hosts, and then pulling data. They do still do some of the exfil that you would expect from someone that traditionally does espionage or like IP theft, things like that. But they're not as primarily focused on it for this threat. They're more focused on the low and slow get in, stay in,
Mm,
potentially cause damage later.
for sure. And definitely that like almost pre-collection, or that collection to as a prereq for the future actions. That's really what we focus on here, is how they under the radar collect all this information that they'll then later be able to use in future attacks.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, we just wanted to make sure you guys got a chance to see this and realize this is a new piece we've added into all of the knowledge base articles and posts we're doing.
Mhm.
Let's see, we've got this one running already for the sake of time on the platform, right?
Yes, I already started
This,
it. You want to go ahead and go through the steps or the
yeah,
campaigns?
yeah. Let's look at some of the interesting steps in the campaign itself, so they can see what that looks like as a result.
Okay. Let's see. I'll just click through some of them here and see if we can find a good one. Oh, I know a good one I was looking at earlier. So in here, we can see the
Yep.
actual clearing of the event logs. So this is the command that we have run in our threat, in our campaign. You can see here that these were the number of logs, log entries, log entry number, whatever, that were in each of these respective logs. So it went from 20,000 to 0. You see in
A
here that,
lot of nothing.
yeah, that it's going in, it's clearing all of the event logs in there. So that one's a really very neat one we have in there. Let's see. That's the L. Let me see if I can find the LSAS.
Let's show them what it looks like where they're pulling the um, event codes too from
Oh yeah,
logs.
that'd
That one's
be
kind of interesting.
up here at the top.
Oh,
So in
I
here
did.
again,
Yep.
it outputs it to the file. But see here, we have this is the process that runs for them to go in and actually pull out the valid users from the event log. See if I can find one that has a little bit of umph into it. Oh, so in here we have it running that putty enumeration. See, we have this obviously staged stored credentials here. So go into the evil computer, which is evil.computer.local with this user named user. But if you really use putty in your environment to go around, this would have multiple machines, maybe jump boxes, maybe usernames for you to get in there. So definitely a very interesting, novel way that they identify what other machines are on your network.
Yeah. So all in all, this one it runs. It's awesome. It's different from a lot of the stuff we've built previously. I like the way
Yeah.
the novel stuff is working.
And then you can see it in there too. Oh, well, this is a dumb. Our test machine isn't on a domain, so that's why that failed. It's intended. But here we have some of the spelling errors in there, which you can see had failed out obviously because it's Wiminick instead of Wimic, which runs right afterwards. So in there, just give it some more kind of realism, especially if maybe you're running this threat in like a purple team kind of engagement, or maybe you're running it as a red team seeing what your blue is going to respond with. It makes it look a little more real. You can you can modify the threat to add more delays and things like that in there. So maybe you could have them doing a spelling error, having a 30-second, 45-second delay, however long delay for them to realize it, research it, and then go back in to kind of add a little more realism to your defenders as they're going through there trying to identify this.
Yep. Which goes right into that play pause feature we've got built on the campaign now too. If you wanted to
Yep.
like actually pause your engagements and see how
Mhm.
they react to certain behaviors and give them a chance before you start throwing more at them, that's super helpful, super easy.
Yeah, for sure. The pause feature is so useful, especially you can pause it, drop into the shell, like maybe you were doing that LSAS dump I was talking about earlier. You do the LSAS dump, you exfiltrate it out of there, you pause the campaign, you do your offline cracking of those passwords of those dumps, and then you go into the shell. You can then utilize those passwords that you just cracked to then do the to perform follow-on actions without having to leave the campaign or leave the site platform at all, which is pretty cool.
For sure. Well, we hit about the 18-minute mark. Let's talk detections. What do we got
All right.
built here to kind of show
That's
and
what we're
help
talking
with
about.
this?
This is what the people want to see. Everyone knows that blue team is where it's at, and that's it. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Just kidding. But we have some detections here. I have it in this Splunk dashboard. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit because we have it zoomed in for the platform, but it's kind of hard to see all the rules. So I'll have it zoomed out a little bit. Hopefully everybody can still see it. But just kind of quickly because we're running out of time, we have some rules in here to look at suspicious archive creation. So we can see that VT, which is the Volt Typhoon executable, what I named it, went in and created this history.zip and info.zip. And this suspicious archive creation rule is really neat. I'll open it up real quick. What it looks for is basically if a file is created, so it's in sysmon using event code 11. If a file is created with like a standard zip um, file type, so like .7zip, .tar, .wim, .zip, obviously, things like that, or it sees those in the command line, but those files were not created by 7zip or Explorer or WinRAR, then it'll identify it here. So these two .zips were created either from that romf.exe that I was talking about that they renamed, or they were created via PowerShell. So very uncommon for a normal enterprise network to have zips created other than someone opening up Explorer, right-clicking, add to archive, or opening up Explorer, right-clicking, 7-zip, add to archive. Those are really the only two ways I've ever seen people do it for legitimate reasons, other than maybe like administrators. So this is a very useful detection. It catches a lot of stuff that we compress files in a lot of our threats, and this catches it almost all the time. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but it's very effective. Here we see some PS execution, which is really just looking for PS execution on the machine. It's really just by image, just by keyword. Nothing too fancy there. We have the event log. Excuse me. We have the event log being cleared here, and this one I believe is still just kind of like teeing up on keywords. So it's like if the image is PowerShell or command line and it uses things like get event log or clear event log, things like that, different aliases. We have this one, which I always think this one is neat and very important. So you want to look at what your what the parent images of command prompt and PowerShell are, because it's the number one way to live off the land. I've been seeing a lot on Twitter that that PowerShell is dead. I don't know where that is coming from
Long
because
live PowerShell.
it is not dead. I mean, I don't know where that's coming from. But you want to monitor what is the parent process, what is spawning PowerShell and command line, because if you have, like in here we see the Volt Typhoon.exe, which is obviously would be named something else, or vt.exe, which is the same thing, spawning PowerShell, spawning command line, which then goes in here. Over here on the right, we can see it, this cmd.exe spawning further discovery commands. So you want to look at what is spawning command shell and PowerShell. If you're seeing strange executables on the desktop or download local files, you see outlook.exe spawning PowerShell. I mean, that should trigger some alarms, right? Then I just kind of briefly talked about the discovery commands. This really just looks for a list of discovery commands in there, and then we have in future detections where it looks for those discovery commands being done in a certain amount of time. So let's say we have a list of 50 different low bass discovery techniques they could run, like net, system info, queue user, IP config, etc. If our SIEM sees those, let's say 10 of those being run within a 5-second window or something like that, it would trigger an alert. So more of like a time-based, because it can be fairly common for discovery commands to be run on your environment, especially by administrators or just kind of curious users. I live in the command prompt. I try to use the mouse as little as possible. I like to just type out who am I, IP config, things like that. Maybe that's from being an IT than cyber person for such a long time, but it's just so much faster. But in most environments, that's pretty uncommon. And if you have one strange user that always does that, you can just kind of exclude that. Whoa, sorry, I made my screen full screen there. Then we have some suspicious executables. So this is just looking for PS1, exe. What are some other executable file types? I can't think of any right now, but any kind of executable file type down there at the end. Basically, if it's running outside of program files, I want to know about it, right? And there's some exclusions to that, like Outlook and things like that run a lot on inside of the local app directories, and things like temp directories and things like that. So you can exclude those. But for the most part, if an executable is running and it's not in program files or program files 86 or system 32, you're gonna want to know about that. And then here, these are just all the values. This is just a table of, I set the parent image or the image to vt.exe, which is again the name of the executable that we had it in here, and it just goes through the list of everything it does. And then this is just another. This is basically the same view, just with a little more information. You can see all the commands here, the image and the parent command line and parent image of what's running it, all the way down. But then there was just one more quick thing that I wanted to show. So I've been messing around with with this app on Splunk called PS Tree. So what this does, basically, it has this fancy, very fancy. I didn't write this. I copied this from the app and then modified it a little bit to fit us. But it's going inside of your sysmon log, looking at event code 1, which is process creation, and then this is the host name here because I wanted it, to not be super taxing on the seam. And it's going in. I'm looking for just no parent image of Splunk because there's 100,000 logs of Splunk. It has this for the universal forwarder on our lab machine, on our host machine. So I have that excluded just to kind of push the noise out. Then it goes in and extracts the parent image, and then it's able to extrapolate who is the parent process of who, and it pulls out the PID. So very, very interesting. If I scroll, you see it's a bunch of stuff because it's capturing pretty much everything. I didn't want to do a lot of filtering on it. I've just been newly kind of messing around with it. Again, it's called PS Tree. But you can see here, this PowerShell.exe is spawning VT.exe, which again for the 100th time is the Volt Typhoon executable, which spawns PowerShell, PSExec. You can see the actual commands that it's running over here, and then that ping sweep that I was talking about that we download. You can see here that every IP address that it's going to, every line of that script is being logged, and very easy to see who, and by who I mean what processes, what parent process is spawning this. It becomes very obvious. PowerShell spawn virus or virus total VT virus total spawn Volt Typhoon, which went into PowerShell and did this this ping.ps1. If I scroll for about 100 times, see down here at the bottom. After that, it also spawns cmd.exe, which I talked about before, which does this net stat, runs this net command to pull what programs are set to start when the computer turns on. That net time to the domain, which we saw, system info, queue user, more system info, more discovery. You guys can see it, but I've found this very useful. It reminds me of like process tree from the sysinternal suite or the proc list or things like that, and it's right there in Splunk in the seam, so it's all right there in one place. I've really enjoyed playing around with this.
Super handy, super useful. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
nice
very
if you
cool.
can bring everything into one point. You're not having to
Yep.
go 5, 10 different tabs or different hosts even to look for different things. You can have it all in a nice, neat little bow.
Yeah, if you can't get to something in 3 clicks, I'm not going to it.
Right. Well, I think that's not bad on timing. I mean, 27 minutes were definitely shorter than last time.
Yeah, yeah, not too bad. We're shorter than that workshop we had yesterday too. So,
Right. Any parting shots on this one before we let the people go?
I think we're gonna continue doing these Thread Thursdays. I think we're bumping them up to twice a month, coming up here soon. So check out our workshops links. We do a bunch of other workshops. We had a Power to the Purple yesterday. We got thread emulations. We have Sigma workshops, uh, detection engineering stuff. All kinds of different workshops, all kinds of different things. Trey and I have our socials on here under our names. If you guys want to connect and talk about anything, or if you got any questions or anything like that, I absolutely love talking about detection engineering and Splunk and finding the bad guy and things like that. So feel free to connect. I'd love to.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think that about wraps us for this edition. Until next time, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.